The wind cut through the Arizona canyon like a cavalry saber, carrying with it the promise of snow and death. Samuel Garrett stood in the doorway of his ranch house, a weathered structure of adobe and timber that had seen better decades, and watched the last of the daylight bleed out across the desert floor. His breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. Behind him, the house held nothing but empty shelves and the ghost of his wife's presence, gone these past 2 years to consumption. In the corral, his last horse, a sturdy buckskin mare named Duchess, stamped her hooves against the frozen ground. She was all that remained of a herd that had once numbered 40 head. The drought had taken most of them. Disease had claimed the rest. Samuel had already sold everything else, his cattle, his spare tack, even his wife's wedding ring. Duchess was his final asset. His only chance to ride the 30 miles to Socorro before the mountain passes became impassable, and winter locked him in this dying ranch to starve. He was 52 years old, too old to start over, too stubborn to quit. His hands, gnarled from decades of ranch work, trembled slightly as he pulled his coat tighter. Not from cold, from hunger. He had not eaten in 2 days, saving the last of his cornmeal for the journey he would make at first light. The sound reached him before he saw them, the soft crunch of boots on frozen earth, moving with the careful deliberation of people who had learned to walk quietly or die. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to the Patterson Colt at his hip, then froze as 4 figures emerged from the gathering darkness at the edge of his property. Women, 4 Apache women, moving in a tight cluster, supporting each other. Even in the dimness, Samuel could see they were in bad shape. Their clothing, traditional Apache dresses and blankets, were torn and stained with what looked like blood. The tallest one in front had a bloody cloth wrapped around her left arm. They moved like people at the end of their strength, each step a visible effort. Samuel's mind raced through his options. The Apache wars had raged across this territory for years, leaving bodies and burned homesteads in their wake. Most ranchers would have shot first and buried the bodies later, claiming self-defense. The cavalry paid bounties, no questions asked, but Samuel had seen enough killing. His own son had died at adobe walls, cut down by Comanche warriors when he was barely 19. Killing these women would not bring Billy back. The women stopped about 20 yards from his porch, the tall one raising her empty hands in a gesture of peace. She spoke in Apache, her voice hoarse and strained. Samuel knew perhaps 24 words of the language, learned from trading with peaceful bands before the wars escalated. He caught the words for help and water. "I do not mean you harm," Samuel called out in English, keeping his hand away from his gun, "but I have little to offer." The tall woman switched to broken English, her accent thick but intelligible. "We need horse. Soldiers come. We run 3 days. No food, no water. Sister hurt bad." She gestured to the woman beside her, who was being held upright by the other 2. Even from this distance, Samuel could see the fever-bright eyes, the way she swayed despite their support. "What happened?" Samuel asked, though he could guess. The cavalry had been conducting sweeps through the territory for months, trying to force the remaining free Apache bands onto the reservations. "Ambush. San Mateo Mountains. They kill many. We escape. Now we try to reach father's band. North near Magdalena. But sister cannot walk more. She die if we not get help." Samuel felt something twist in his chest. He looked past them into the darkness, half expecting to see cavalry troops or Apache warriors materializing from the shadows. But there was nothing. Just 4 desperate women and the howling wind. "I have 1 horse," he said slowly. "My last horse." The tall woman nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "We pay. When we reach father, he pay much. My father is Nayati. He is chief. He has horses, cattle from raids. He pay good." Samuel had heard of Nayati. Every settler in the territory had. He was one of the few Apache chiefs who had refused to surrender, who still conducted raids and led his warriors with the cunning that had kept them free for years. The man was a legend, spoken of with equal parts fear and grudging respect. "If I give you my horse, I die," Samuel said flatly. "I have no food. No way to reach town before the passes close. That horse is my life." The woman met his eyes, and in that moment, Samuel saw something he had not expected: understanding. She knew exactly what she was asking. She was not pleading or making false promises. She was simply stating facts, one desperate human to another. "Then we all die together," she said quietly. "Sister die tonight. We die tomorrow, maybe next day. You die in week, maybe 2. All dead." She paused, then added, "But if you help, maybe we live, maybe you live too. My father is man of honor, he pay debt." Samuel looked at the injured woman. She had slumped further, barely conscious. The other two women, younger, perhaps early 20s, held her with the fierce protectiveness of family. Their faces were gaunt with starvation, their lips cracked and bleeding from exposure. He thought of Billy, dying alone on a Texas plain far from home. He thought of his wife, Martha, who had always insisted on feeding any traveler who came to their door, regardless of color or creed. She would have known what to do. She would have helped without hesitation. But Martha was not here, and this decision fell to Samuel alone. The wind picked up, carrying with it the first scattered snowflakes of what promised to be a heavy storm. In a few hours, the temperature would drop below freezing. The women would not survive the night in the open. Neither would their injured sister. Samuel made his decision. "Bring her inside," he said, stepping back from the door. "Get her warm. I will fetch the horse." The tall woman's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with something like gratitude. She spoke rapidly to her sisters in Apache, and they moved forward, half carrying the injured woman up the porch steps. As they passed him, Samuel got a better look at them. The injured one was perhaps 25, her face twisted in pain, a bullet wound in her side that had been inexpertly bandaged. The tall one who spoke English was older, maybe 30, with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone used to making hard decisions. The two younger ones were twins, identical in their dark beauty and shared expression of exhaustion and fear. Samuel watched them settle the injured woman near his small fireplace, then turned and walked out to the corral. Duchess whinnied softly as he approached, pressing her nose against his hand. He had raised her from a foal, trained her himself. She was gentle, sure-footed, and strong enough to carry two riders if necessary. "I am sorry, girl," he whispered, running his hand along her neck. "But I cannot watch people die when I have the means to help them. Martha would never forgive me. Hell, I would never forgive myself." He saddled her quickly, his movements automatic after years of practice. He added his spare saddle blanket, his canteen, still half full of water, and the small pouch of cornmeal that represented his last food. It would not be enough for 4 women making a hard ride north, but it was something. When he led Duchess back to the house, the women had managed to start a small fire in the fireplace, using the last of his kindling. The tall woman had removed her sister's bandages and was examining the wound by firelight. It looked bad, infected, the edges inflamed and weeping. Without proper care, the woman would be dead in a day or two. Samuel cleared his throat. "I have some whiskey. Not much, but you can use it to clean the wound, and some old cloth for bandages." The woman looked up at him, and this time there was unmistakable respect in her gaze. "You are good man. What is your name?" "Samuel Garrett. And you?" "I am Kiona. This is Helona." She gestured to the injured woman. "And these are Ayasha and Nita." The twins nodded, their expressions solemn. Samuel fetched his small bottle of whiskey and a clean shirt he had been saving. He watched as Kiona cleaned the wound with the efficiency of someone who had treated injuries before, her sister biting down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. When it was done, Helona was pale and sweating, but her breathing seemed a bit easier. "She needs a doctor," Samuel said. "But the nearest one is in Socorro, and that is in the opposite direction from where you are headed." "Father's band has medicine woman," Kiona said. "She will help, if we can reach them." She stood, facing Samuel directly. "Your horse. You sure?" Samuel looked at Duchess, then back at the 4 women. He thought about the empty cupboards, the closed mountain passes, the cold that would deepen with each passing day. He thought about dying alone in this house, just another forgotten rancher swallowed by the territory's indifference. "I am sure," he said, "but I need you to understand something. If your father does not come, or if you do not reach him, I am dead. This is not charity. This is me trusting that your father is the man of honor you say he is." Kiona held his gaze. "My father will come. On this, I swear on the blood of my ancestors. When he learns what you have done, he will come." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then we have an agreement. Take the horse, take the supplies, ride hard and do not stop. The cavalry patrols this area, and if they find you with my horse, they will assume you stole it." "What will you tell them?" Kiona asked. "The truth, that I gave it to you freely. Whether they believe me is another matter." Kiona studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She reached into her dress and pulled out a small pouch hanging from a leather cord around her neck. From it she withdrew a turquoise stone, polished smooth and strung on a thin strip of rawhide. "This belongs to my father," she said, pressing it into Samuel's hand. "When he sees this, he will know you speak truth. He will know that Kiona gave it, and that debt must be paid. Keep it safe. The stone was warm from her body heat, smooth against Samuel's calloused palm. It seemed an insignificant thing to stake his life on, but as he looked into Kiona's eyes, he saw the weight she placed on it. "I will keep it safe," he promised. They worked quickly after that. The twins helped their injured sister onto the horse, while Kiona secured the supplies. Samuel showed them the best route north, the paths that avoided the main cavalry patrols, the places where they might find water. He gave them what knowledge he could, knowing it might not be enough. As they prepared to leave, Halona, despite her injury, reached down from the horse and touched Samuel's shoulder. She spoke in Apache, her voice weak but intense. Kiona translated, "She says the spirits will remember your kindness, that you will not die forgotten in this place, that life will come to you when you need it most." Samuel did not believe in Apache spirits any more than he believed in the Christian God his wife had prayed to, but he nodded his thanks anyway. Hope, even false hope, was something in a hopeless situation. Then they were gone, disappearing into the darkness and swirling snow, the sound of hoofbeats fading until there was nothing but wind and silence. Samuel stood on his porch, the turquoise stone clutched in his hand, and watched them go. He felt strangely light, as if some burden he had not known he carried had lifted. He went back inside and stared at his empty home. Without the horse, he had no way to leave. Without food, he had perhaps a week before hunger became critical. Without firewood, he would freeze within days once his small supply ran out. He had just signed his own death warrant, but he had also saved 4 lives. In this brutal territory, where death came easy and mercy was a luxury few could afford, that seemed like something worth dying for. Samuel sat down by the dying fire and clutched the turquoise stone. Tomorrow he would inventory what he had left, maybe find a way to extend his supplies. Maybe a miracle would happen. Maybe a trader would pass by. Maybe the cavalry would check on isolated ranches before the deep winter set in. Maybe Kiona's father would actually come. But tonight he had done the right thing. Martha would have been proud. Billy too. Samuel Garrett, 52 years old, alone in a dying ranch at the edge of nowhere, closed his eyes and tried not to think about the morning. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, covering the hoofprints that led north into the darkness, erasing all evidence that 4 Apache women and a buckskin mare had ever been there at all. The first 3 days passed in a fog of cold and hunger. Samuel rationed what little he had, a handful of dried beans he found in a forgotten jar. Some coffee grounds he reused until they yielded nothing but brown water, a strip of jerky so old it might have been made when Lincoln was still alive. He burned his furniture for warmth piece by piece, first the spare chair, then the small table Martha had been so proud of, then finally the wooden frame of their marriage bed. He kept only what he could not bear to burn, the rocking chair where she had sat during her final months, and the small chest that held Billy's letters from the war. The snow fell steadily, transforming the landscape into an alien world of white silence. Samuel watched from his window as drifts piled against the corral fence, burying the tracks where Duchess had stood. The mountain passes would be closed now, completely impassable until spring. No one would come from Socorro. No traders would risk the journey. He was truly alone. On the 4th morning, Samuel woke to find his water bucket frozen solid, despite being inside the house. His breath formed thick clouds, and when he tried to stand, dizziness nearly sent him to his knees. Hunger had moved beyond discomfort into something darker, a gnawing emptiness that made his thoughts slow and his hands shake. He clutched the turquoise stone Kiona had given him, turning it over in his fingers like a talisman. Had they made it? Was Halona still alive? Had they reached Nayati's band? Or had the cavalry caught them? Had he thrown away his life for nothing? The questions circled his mind like vultures, but he had no answers. All he could do was endure. On the 5th day, Samuel forced himself to go outside. The exertion of wading through knee-deep snow to check his empty corral left him gasping and weak. On his way back, he stumbled and fell, lying in the snow for long minutes, staring up at the grey sky. It would be easy, he thought, to just stay here, to let the cold take him. Quick and painless, they said, once the shivering stopped. But Martha's voice echoed in his memory. "You're too stubborn to die easy, Samuel Garrett." Too stubborn by half. He pushed himself up and made it back to the house. That night he burned the last of his furniture, a shelf Martha had made herself, and tried not to think about what he would burn tomorrow. The 6th day brought a break in the weather. Pale sunlight filtered through thinning clouds, making the snow glitter like broken glass. Samuel sat on his porch, wrapped in every blanket he owned, and watched the horizon. The cold hurt his lungs with each breath, but after days trapped inside, even freezing fresh air felt like a blessing. That was when he saw the rider. At first, he thought it was a hallucination brought on by hunger and exposure. A single figure on horseback, moving slowly through the deep snow, heading directly toward his ranch. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. Cavalry? A traveler? Some desperate soul like himself looking for shelter? As the rider drew closer, Samuel recognized the horse first. Duchess. His buckskin mare, unmistakable even at a distance. The rider was bundled in blankets and furs, but something in the posture seemed familiar. Samuel rose unsteadily to his feet, gripping the porch rail for support. The rider entered his yard and pulled back the hood of her coverings. Kiona. Her face was drawn and windburned, exhaustion evident in every line, but she was alive, and she was not alone. Behind her, emerging from the tree line like ghosts materializing from snow, came warriors. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Apache warriors on horseback, moving in absolute silence through the winter landscape. They spread out in a wide semicircle around Samuel's property, their faces impassive, their weapons ready but not raised. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. This was not a rescue party. This was an army. At the center of the formation, on a magnificent paint stallion, rode a man who could only be Nayati. Even at a distance, his presence was commanding. A warrior in his prime, perhaps 45 years old, with the bearing of someone who had led men through fire and blood and never wavered. He wore traditional Apache clothing, augmented with items taken from fallen enemies. A cavalry officer's belt, a silver-trimmed saddle, a rifle that looked newer and better maintained than anything Samuel had ever owned. Kiona dismounted from Duchess with visible effort, approaching Samuel's porch. "We made it," she said simply. "Halona lives. Father's medicine woman saved her." She paused, studying Samuel's gaunt face, his shaking hands. "But you are dying." "Slowly," Samuel admitted. His voice came out as a croak. "But I am still here." Kiona turned and spoke in rapid Apache to her father. Nayati dismounted with fluid grace and walked forward, his warriors remaining motionless behind him. Up close, Samuel could see the intelligence in his eyes, the scars that marked his arms and chest, the gray threading through his long black hair. This was a man who had survived decades of warfare, who had outmaneuvered cavalry units and led successful raids against fortified positions. A man not to be underestimated. Nayati stopped at the base of the porch steps, studying Samuel with the same intensity Samuel had seen in Kiona. Then he spoke, his English heavily accented but clear. "You gave your last horse to my daughters, knowing it would kill you." "Yes," Samuel said. There seemed no point in elaborating. Why? It was the question Samuel had asked himself 100 times during the long, cold nights. He thought about all the reasons he could give: Christian charity, common decency, the memory of his wife's compassion. But in the end, he settled on the simplest truth: because they would have died, and I am tired of death. Something flickered in Nayati's eyes. He reached into his clothing and withdrew the turquoise stone, holding it up so Samuel could see it. "My daughter gave you this. It was gift from my father to me when I became war chief. It means sacred debt, debt that must be paid." "She said you were a man of honor," Samuel replied. I believed her. Nayati studied him for a long moment, then turned and barked orders in Apache. Immediately, warriors sprang into action. Some dismounted and began unloading supplies from pack horses Samuel had not noticed: bundles of firewood, sacks of food, blankets, and furs. Others moved to Samuel's barn and began clearing snow, working with efficient purpose. Within minutes, Samuel's property was transformed into a hive of organized activity. Kiona helped Samuel back inside, where 2 Apache women, one of them the medicine woman who had saved Halona, began examining him with brisk professionalism. They spoke in Apache, but their meaning was clear from their actions. They built up the fire to a roaring blaze, heated water, and began preparing food. Real food, the smell of it making Samuel's empty stomach clench painfully. "Slowly," Kiona warned, as one of the women handed him a bowl of thin broth. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Samuel sipped the broth, the warmth of it spreading through his body like liquid life. Each swallow seemed to chase back the grey fog that had been closing in around his mind. He looked up at Kiona. "Ah, your sister?" "Recovering. The wound was bad, but she is strong. She will live, thanks to you." Kiona sat down across from him, her own exhaustion evident. We almost did not make it. Cavalry patrol caught our trail on the second day. We had to ride through a blizzard to lose them. Halona nearly died from the cold, but the horse you gave us, she never faltered. She carried Halona and Ayasha both through snow up to her chest for hours. Duchess is a good horse, Samuel said quietly. The best, Kiona agreed. Father said so too. He wants to give you 10 horses in trade. Good horses, strong. Samuel shook his head. I do not need 10 horses. I need to survive the winter. After that, 1 good horse will be enough. Kiona smiled slightly. You do not understand. Father does not ask. He has decided. 10 horses and more. Food, supplies, everything you need. This is how we pay debts. Before Samuel could respond, Nayati entered the house, ducking slightly to clear the low doorframe. He looked around at the bare interior, the burned furniture, the empty shelves, the signs of a man who had given away everything. His expression remained neutral, but Samuel thought he saw a flicker of respect. Through Kiona they talked. Samuel learned that Nayati's band had been driven from their traditional territories, pushed into increasingly marginal lands by cavalry sweeps and settler expansion. They raided to survive, taking cattle and horses and supplies, always moving, always 1 step ahead of the troops hunting them. It was a hard life, brutal and uncertain, but they refused to submit to reservation life, which they saw as a slow death of the spirit. Why did your daughters travel without warriors? Samuel asked. Nayati's face darkened. They should not have been separated. We were camped near San Mateo Springs. Cavalry came at dawn, more troops than we expected, with Comanche scouts. We had to scatter. My daughters rode east with a group of women and children, trying to reach safety. The cavalry followed them. They were ambushed in a canyon. Many died. My daughters survived only because they knew the land and rode hard. I am sorry for your losses, Samuel said. Nayati nodded gravely. This is our life now. Death follows us like shadow. But you had nothing and still you gave. This is rare thing, in world where Apache and white man kill each other without mercy. I had a son, Samuel found himself saying. Billy. He died at Adobe Walls, killed by Comanche. I hated Indians for years after that. Hated all of them, even though I knew the Comanche and Apache are enemies. Hatred is easy. It asks nothing of you except to keep hating. He paused, staring into the fire. But my wife Martha, she never hated. Even after Billy died, she said hate would not bring him back. She said if we become monsters to fight monsters, then the monsters have already won. The room was quiet, except for the crackling fire. Nayati sat motionless, processing Samuel's words. Finally he spoke. Your wife was wise woman. My own wife died 7 years ago, killed by cavalry during attack on our camp. She was not warrior. She was just woman, gathering water from stream. They shot her because she was Apache. His voice remained level, but Samuel heard the old pain beneath it. I wanted to kill every white man I saw. For years, I did kill them, but killing does not bring back the dead. It only makes more ghosts. Samuel met Nayati's eyes and saw something unexpected, a reflection of his own grief and exhaustion, his own soul-deep weariness with violence. They were enemies, by every measure that mattered in this territory. But in this moment, in this cold house filled with the ghosts of loved ones lost, they were simply 2 men who had survived too much. What happens now? Samuel asked quietly. Nayati glanced at Kiona, who translated his response. Now you live. Father's people will camp nearby for a few days, help you prepare for winter. We bring enough food and supplies to last until spring. We bring horses. We fix your buildings, chop firewood, make sure you survive. The cavalry will see you, Samuel pointed out. They patrol this area. If they find an Apache warband camped at my ranch, they will assume I am a collaborator. They will hang me. Then we must work fast, Nayati said through Kiona. And we must be careful. My scouts watch all approaches. If soldiers come, we will be gone before they arrive. You will say nothing. You will say you have seen no one. They will not believe me, Samuel said, not with all these supplies suddenly appearing. Nayati smiled grimly. Then you tell them you traded with Mexicans. Or you say nothing at all. White men think all Indians are stupid, yes? They will not imagine we came to help you. They will think we came to kill you and then left for some reason. Let them think what they want. It was audacious and dangerous, but Samuel found himself nodding. What choice did he have? Without Nayati's help, he would be dead within days. With it, he might survive to see spring. The risk was worth taking. Over the next 3 days, Samuel's ranch was transformed. Warriors cut and stacked enough firewood to last through 2 winters. They repaired his barn, replacing broken boards and reinforcing the structure against future storms. They brought in supplies, sacks of corn and beans, dried meat, coffee, flour, even some sugar and salt. They brought blankets and furs, cooking pots and utensils, everything Samuel needed to survive in comfort. And they brought horses. Not 10, but 15, strong, healthy animals that represented more wealth than Samuel had possessed in years. Duchess was among them, looking well-fed and cared for. Nayati himself handed her lead rope to Samuel. "She is good horse," Nayati said. "Brave. She saved my daughter's lives. I return her to you with my thanks." Samuel took the rope, running his hand along Duchess's nose. "Thank you for all of this. It is more than I expected, more than I deserve." "You deserve much more," Kiona said, translating her father's words. "You gave everything when you had nothing to give. This is what honor demands. That debt be paid in full." On the morning of the 4th day, as Samuel watched the sun rise over snow-covered landscape, Nayati prepared to lead his people away. The warriors had already struck their camp, leaving almost no trace they had ever been there. Only the repaired buildings and stocked supplies remained as evidence of their presence. Before mounting his horse, Nayati approached Samuel one final time. He spoke in Apache, his words formal and deliberate, while Kiona translated. "Samuel Garrett, you have shown my family mercy when the world shows us only cruelty. You have given life when you could have taken it. For this you are now under my protection. If you ever need help, send word. If anyone threatens you, they threaten me. Your enemies are my enemies. This I swear, before my warriors and the spirits of my ancestors." Samuel did not know how to respond to such a pledge. In this territory, such an oath from an Apache war chief was simultaneously a great honor and a potentially fatal liability. If the cavalry learned that Samuel had allied himself with Nayati, they would consider him a traitor. But looking into Nayati's eyes, Samuel understood that refusing the oath would be an insult, a rejection of the very honor that had brought the chief here in the first place. "I accept your protection," Samuel said carefully, "and I offer the same. If your people need help and I can give it, I will. This I swear." Nayati nodded gravely, then did something unexpected. He reached out and clasped Samuel's forearm in a warrior's grip, the kind of gesture reserved for trusted allies. Samuel returned the grip, feeling the strength in the Apache chief's hand, the calluses from years of holding weapons and reins. Then Nayati mounted his horse and raised his arm. The warriors formed up around him with practiced efficiency, and within moments they were moving out, disappearing into the landscape like smoke dissipating in wind. Kiona was the last to leave. She paused beside Samuel, looking down from her horse. "You saved my family," she said simply. "We do not forget. If you ever need us, light 3 signal fires on that ridge." She pointed to a distinctive rock formation to the north. "We will see it, and we will come." Then she was gone, following her father and sisters into the wilderness, leaving Samuel standing alone in his yard, surrounded by more wealth than he had possessed in a decade, and burdened with secrets that could get him killed if the wrong people learned of them. Samuel Garrett looked at his repaired ranch, at the horses in his corral, at the smoke rising from his chimney where a good fire burned. He was alive. Against all odds, impossibly, he had survived. But as he went back inside his warm house and sat down in Martha's rocking chair, he wondered what price that survival might ultimately demand. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering the tracks of 200 Apache warriors, erasing all evidence that they had ever been there at all. The cavalry came on a cold morning 2 weeks after Nayati's departure. Samuel was in his barn, tending to the horses, when he heard the distinctive sound of multiple riders approaching in formation. His heart sank. He had known this moment would come eventually, but that did not make it any easier to face. He stepped out of the barn as 12 soldiers rode into his yard, led by a captain whose face was weathered by sun and wind into something resembling old leather. The captain's eyes swept over Samuel's property with practiced assessment, the repaired buildings, the well-stocked corral, the smoke rising from a chimney that indicated comfort rather than desperation. "How you are, Samuel Garrett?" the captain asked, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I am," Samuel replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Captain William Hendricks, 3rd Cavalry. We are conducting sweeps of all ranches in this sector. There have been reports of Apache war parties in the area. His eyes narrowed. You seem to be doing well for yourself, Garrett. Last time my men passed through here about 6 weeks back, your place looked like it was on the verge of collapse. Now you have got repairs, supplies, and a whole corral full of horses. That is quite a turnaround. Samuel had prepared for this moment, rehearsing his story during the long winter nights. I got lucky. Mexican trader came through about 3 weeks ago, heading back south before the passes closed. I had some items he wanted, old Spanish coins my wife inherited, and we made a trade, horses and supplies in exchange. Hendricks dismounted, his movements deliberate. He walked to the corral and examined the horses with the eye of someone who knew horseflesh. These are good animals, very good. Apache ponies, unless I miss my guess. Mexican traders do not usually deal in Apache stock. He did not say where he got them, Samuel said carefully. I did not ask. When a man is starving and freezing, he does not question good fortune. Convenient, Hendricks said, his tone making it clear he found nothing convenient about the situation. He turned to face Samuel directly. Let me be frank with you, Garrett. We have been tracking a large Apache war party through this region. Nayati's band, you have heard of him? I have heard the name, Samuel admitted. Then you know he is one of the most dangerous hostiles in the territory. 200 warriors under his command, all of them experienced fighters. They have been raiding ranches and ambushing patrols for years. Hendricks stepped closer, his voice dropping. 3 weeks ago, they vanished, completely disappeared. Right around the time your fortunes apparently improved. You see how that might look suspicious. Samuel met the captain's gaze steadily. I see how it might look, but looks are not facts. I made a trade with a Mexican. That is the truth. Then you will not mind if my men search your property, Hendricks said. It was not a question. For the next hour, Samuel stood in the cold while soldiers ransacked his home and barn. They looked for signs of Apache presence, weapons, clothing, anything that might prove contact with Nayati's band. Samuel's heart hammered each time they examined something closely, but Nayati's people had been careful. They had left supplies but no evidence, nothing that could definitively prove Apache involvement. Finally, Hendricks emerged from the house holding something that made Samuel's blood run cold. The turquoise stone on its leather cord. Samuel had hidden it carefully, but the soldiers had been thorough. Found this in a chest, Hendricks said, holding it up. Apache craftsmanship. This is not something you get from a Mexican trader, Garrett. This is ceremonial, important. The kind of thing an Apache would only give to someone they considered an ally. Samuel's mind raced. Lying further seemed pointless, but the truth would condemn him. He chose his words with extreme care. I found it. Out near the North Ridge about a month ago. Someone must have dropped it. I kept it because it was pretty. You found it, Hendricks repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. By coincidence, right around the time Nayati's band was in this area. I do not know anything about Nayati or his band, Samuel said firmly. I am just a rancher trying to survive the winter. That is all. Hendricks stared at him for a long moment, and Samuel saw the calculation happening behind the captain's eyes. Finally, Hendricks pocketed the turquoise stone. I am confiscating this as evidence, and I am putting you on notice, Garrett. If we find any proof at all, that you have been aiding hostiles, you will hang. Collaboration with the enemy is treason, and we execute traitors in this territory. Do you understand me? I understand, Samuel said quietly. Furthermore, Hendricks continued, you will report to Fort Craig once a month until further notice. If you miss a reporting date, we will assume you have joined up with your Apache friends, and we will treat you accordingly. Samuel nodded, knowing he had no choice. Fort Craig was a 30-mile ride, but it was better than a noose. Hendricks mounted his horse, then paused. One more thing. Where were you on the night of February 4th? The date meant nothing to Samuel. Here. Where else would I be in the middle of winter? That was the night a cavalry patrol was ambushed near San Mateo Springs. 8 men killed, 12 wounded. Apache raiders identified as Nayati's warriors. They knew exactly where that patrol would be and when. Someone gave them information. It was not me, Samuel said. I have not left this ranch in months. Hendricks studied him with cold eyes. Stay here, Garrett. Do not give me a reason to come back, because next time I will not be so understanding. Then the cavalry rode out, leaving Samuel standing in his yard with the sick certainty that his problems had only just begun. The turquoise stone was gone, his one proof of the agreement with Nayati. And now he was marked as a suspected collaborator, watched and suspected by the very military that was supposed to protect him. That night, Samuel sat by his fire and wondered if mercy had been worth the price he was now paying. The weeks that followed were tense and difficult. Samuel made his monthly ride to Fort Craig, enduring the hostile stares of soldiers who clearly suspected him of aiding the enemy. Each trip was an ordeal, a gauntlet of suspicion and barely veiled threats. But he persisted, knowing that missing even one reporting date would condemn him. Spring came slowly to the high desert, the snow melting in reluctant stages. Samuel began working his land again, repairing fences and preparing for the planting season. He kept to himself, avoiding the few neighboring ranchers who might ask awkward questions about his sudden prosperity. Isolation became both his protection and his prison. It was on a warm afternoon in late March when Samuel saw the smoke signals. 3 columns of smoke rising from the ridge Kiona had pointed out, the pattern unmistakable. Someone was calling for help, using the signal she had taught him. Samuel's first instinct was to ignore it. He had already risked too much, drawn too much attention from the cavalry. Getting involved with Nayati's people again would be suicide. But even as he tried to convince himself to stay away, he found himself saddling Duchess and riding toward the ridge. He found them in a narrow canyon about 5 miles from his ranch, Kiona and Ayasha, without horses, carrying an injured man between them. As Samuel rode closer, he recognized the man as one of Nayati's younger warriors, someone who had helped repair his barn during that long winter week. "Samuel Garrett," Kiona said, her voice tight with strain. "Thank the spirits. We need help. What happened?" Samuel dismounted, moving to examine the warrior. He had been shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the leg. The wounds were hours old, still bleeding despite crude bandaging. "Cavalry ambush," Ayasha said, speaking English for the first time in Samuel's presence. Her voice was younger than Kiona's, less hardened by experience. "They caught our hunting party near Alamosa Creek. Most of us escaped, but Takoda was hit. We need medicine, supplies. Cannot take him back to camp like this. He will die before we get there." Samuel looked at the wounded warrior, Takoda, who was barely conscious, his face gray with blood loss and pain. Then he looked at the 2 women, who were themselves exhausted and scared. Every instinct of self-preservation told him to walk away. Captain Hendricks had made the consequences crystal clear. If Samuel was caught helping Apache warriors, he would hang. But looking into Kiona's desperate eyes, Samuel knew he had already made his choice the moment he rode out here. "Bring him to my ranch," he said. "I have medical supplies. We can treat him there." "Too dangerous," Kiona protested. "If soldiers come—" "They will not come today," Samuel interrupted. "I just made my monthly report 3 days ago. They will not check on me again for weeks. We have time." They made the journey slowly. Takoda draped across Duchess's saddle while the women walked alongside to steady him. By the time they reached Samuel's ranch, the warrior had lost consciousness entirely, his breathing shallow and rapid. Samuel had seen enough injuries during his life to know that Takoda was in serious danger. They carried him into the house and laid him on Samuel's bed. Samuel heated water and gathered his medical supplies: whiskey for disinfectant, clean cloth for bandages, a knife sterilized in flame for extracting bullets. It was crude frontier medicine, but it was all he had. "I am not a doctor," Samuel warned as he examined the wounds. "I have treated injuries before, but these are bad. The shoulder wound went clean through, but the leg wound, the bullet is still in there. I will have to dig it out." "Do it," Kiona said firmly. "He trusts you. We all do." The surgery, if it could be called that, was brutal. Takoda regained consciousness halfway through the extraction, his screams echoing through the small house until Ayasha gave him a leather strap to bite down on. Samuel worked as quickly as he could, his hands steady despite the horror of what he was doing. Finally, he felt the forceps close on something solid. He pulled, and the bullet came out in a gush of blood and tissue. "Got it," Samuel said, dropping the bloody slug into a bowl. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with clean cloth, and bandaged it as best he could. "The rest is up to him. If infection sets in, there is nothing more I can do." Takoda passed out again, which Samuel took as a mercy. They moved him carefully, making him as comfortable as possible. Kiona and Ayasha took turns watching over him while Samuel prepared food, simple stew made from his dwindling supplies, but hot and nourishing. As they ate, Samuel asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why were you hunting so close to cavalry territory? Nayati is too smart to take that kind of risk." Kiona and Ayasha exchanged glances. Finally, Kiona spoke. "We are running out of land. The cavalry pushes us farther north and west every week. The good hunting grounds, the water sources, all controlled by soldiers or settlers now. We must take risks to feed our people, or we starve." "How many in your band?" Samuel asked. "Nearly 400. Men, women, children. All that remains of 3 different bands that cavalry destroyed. Father has kept us alive by moving constantly, raiding when we must, hiding when we can. But it gets harder every season. Soon, there will be nowhere left to run." The bleakness in her voice chilled Samuel. He thought about the cavalry's determination to crush all Apache resistance, the relentless pressure that left Nayati's people with fewer and fewer options. It was not a war anyone could win, only a slow grinding down until nothing remained but graves and memories. "Your father should consider the reservation," Samuel said carefully. "I know it is not what he wants, but at least your people would be alive. They would have food, shelter, they would have prison." Ayasha interrupted, her voice sharp. "You have seen reservation, Samuel Garrett. You have seen how Apache live there, starving, because government supplies never come, sick, because no medicine, beaten, because soldiers think we are animals. Father says death in freedom better than life in cage. We all believe this." Samuel had no answer to that. He had heard the stories about reservation conditions, the corruption and neglect that turned them into death camps in all but name. Perhaps Nayati was right. Perhaps death was preferable to that kind of existence. They stayed 3 days while Dakota fought for his life. The warrior was young and strong, and Samuel's crude surgery had apparently been enough. The fever came, as Samuel had known it would, but it broke on the 2nd night. By the 3rd day, Dakota was conscious and able to take water and thin broth. On the morning of the 4th day, Samuel was awakened by the sound of horses. His heart sank as he looked out and saw not cavalry, but Nayati himself, riding into his yard with a small group of warriors. The Apache chief's face was a mask of controlled fury as he dismounted and strode toward the house. Kiona met her father at the door, speaking rapidly in Apache, explaining the situation. Samuel watched as Nayati's expression shifted from anger to something more complex: concern for his wounded warrior, gratitude toward Samuel, and fear for what this new act of mercy might cost the white rancher, who had once again risked everything to help his people. Nayati entered the house and went directly to Dakota's bedside. The wounded warrior managed a weak smile and spoke in Apache. Nayati gripped his shoulder gently, then turned to face Samuel. "You save my daughters. Now you save my warrior. You risk your life again and again for my people." Nayati's English was slow and careful, weighted with meaning. "Why? What do you want from us?" Samuel considered the question seriously. "I do not want anything. I just cannot stand by and watch people die when I have the power to help them. Call it stubbornness, call it foolishness, but it is who I am." Nayati studied him for a long moment, then said something that surprised Samuel. "You are warrior without war. You have courage but no enemy to fight, so you fight death itself even when death would be easier." He paused. "I understand this. I am also a warrior who is tired of war, but war does not let me stop fighting." "Then maybe it is time to stop anyway," Samuel said quietly, "before there is no one left to fight for." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither man wanted to fully examine. Finally, Nayati nodded slowly. "We will take Dakota home. He can travel now if we go slowly." He looked at Samuel with something approaching warmth in his usually guarded eyes. "You have earned more than my gratitude, Samuel Garrett. You have earned my friendship. In this land at this time that is a dangerous thing to have, but it is yours whether you want it or not." "I will take it," Samuel said, "and hope we both survive having it." They prepared to leave as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Dakota was secured on a travois, the best way to transport him without worsening his injuries. As they worked, Samuel noticed Nayati watching the southern horizon with the constant vigilance of a man who has survived decades of warfare. "Cavalry patrols this area frequently," Samuel warned. "If they catch you here, we will be gone before they arrive," Nayati assured him. "My scouts watch all approaches. But you are in danger now, more than before. Captain Hendricks suspects you. He will be watching." "I know," Samuel said. "He took the turquoise stone, the one Kiona gave me." Nayati's expression darkened. "That stone was proof of our agreement. Without it, you have nothing to show that you acted with honor." He reached into his clothing and withdrew another stone, this one larger and more intricately carved. "Take this. It is more valuable, more sacred. Any Apache who sees it will know you are protected. And if white men take it also, then at least you will know we tried." Samuel accepted the stone, feeling the weight of the responsibility it represented. "Thank you." As Nayati prepared to mount his horse, he turned back to Samuel one final time. "Be careful, Samuel Garrett. The world is not kind to men who show mercy to their enemies. It will punish you for your goodness if it can." "Then I will endure the punishment," Samuel replied, "because the alternative is to become something I cannot live with being." Nayati smiled grimly. "You are stubborn, man, like me. This is why we are both still alive when wiser men have died." He raised his hand in farewell. "Until we meet again, friend." Then they were gone, disappearing into the landscape with Takoda and the knowledge that Samuel Garrett had once again put everything at risk for people who were supposed to be his mortal enemies. Samuel stood in his yard watching them go and wondered how many more times he could roll the dice before his luck ran out. Captain Hendricks was watching him. The cavalry would return eventually, and when they did, what evidence might they find? What price would Samuel ultimately pay for his persistent, stubborn mercy? He went back inside his now empty house and stared at the turquoise stone Nayati had given him. It was beautiful, sacred, and potentially the evidence that would get him hanged. But as Samuel tucked it carefully into his chest beside Billy's letters and Martha's wedding ring, he found he did not regret his choices. Not yet, maybe not ever. Outside, the spring sun warmed the desert, melting the last traces of winter snow and revealing the hard, unforgiving land that had claimed so many lives and would doubtless claim many more before the story of the frontier was finished. Samuel Garrett, stubborn and foolish and still alive, went out to tend his horses and prepare for whatever came next. Summer came to the territory with brutal intensity, turning the land into a furnace that tested the endurance of everything living. Samuel worked his ranch through the heat, planting crops that had little chance of surviving without more rain than the sky seemed willing to provide. He made his monthly rides to Fort Craig, each visit more tense than the last, as Captain Hendricks's suspicion grew into something approaching obsession. "You are hiding something, Garrett," Hendricks told him during the July report. "I can feel it. And when I figure out what it is, you are going to hang." Samuel said nothing, knowing that any defense would only feed the captain's certainty. He simply nodded and rode home, feeling the weight of hostile eyes on his back the entire journey. It was during the August heat that everything changed. Samuel was repairing fence line when he heard riders approaching, not from the south where the cavalry came, but from the east, where nothing lay but open desert and the scattered remnants of other failed ranches. He straightened, shading his eyes against the fierce sun, and felt his stomach drop as he recognized the lead rider, Tom Bridger, his nearest neighbor, a man Samuel had known for 15 years. But Bridger was not alone. Behind him rode a dozen men, all armed, all wearing expressions that made Samuel's hand move instinctively toward his rifle. "Tom," Samuel called out, keeping his voice neutral. "What brings you out here?" Bridger reined in his horse at the fence line, his weathered face grim. "Need to talk to you, Sam, about your Apache friends." The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. Samuel felt his heart hammering, but kept his expression calm. "I do not know what you're talking about." "Do not play stupid," another man said, Jack Morrison, who ran cattle 20 miles south. "We have all heard the stories, how you got rich over the winter, how cavalry found Apache trinkets in your house, how wounded hostiles show up at your place and somehow manage to disappear before the soldiers arrive." "Stories are not facts," Samuel said carefully. "Then explain the facts," Bridger demanded. "Explain how you went from starving to prosperous in one winter. Explain the horses you got. Apache bred every one of them. Explain why Nayati's raiders seem to know exactly where cavalry patrols will be, and when." "I cannot explain things I know nothing about," Samuel replied. "I made a trade with a Mexican. The cavalry searched my property and found nothing. These are the facts." "The fact is you are a traitor," Morrison spat. "You are helping the hostiles murder white men and women. My brother-in-law was in that patrol that got ambushed at San Mateo Springs. 8 good men died that night. And you? You are sitting here fat and happy on Apache charity." Samuel felt anger rising in his chest, but forced it down. Anger would not help him here. "Your brother-in-law's death was a tragedy, but I had nothing to do with it. I have not left my property except for my monthly reports to Fort Craig." "Liar," someone else shouted from the back. "We know the truth. We know you are in league with Nayati." Bridger raised his hand, silencing the others. "Here is how this is going to work, Sam. You are going to tell us everything you know about Nayati's band, where they camp, how many warriors he has, where they get their supplies. You are going to help us end this menace once and for all. "And if I refuse?" Samuel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we will assume you are a collaborator," Bridger said flatly. "And we will deal with you the same way we deal with hostiles. We are forming a militia, settlers and ranchers who are tired of waiting for the cavalry to protect us. We are going to hunt down Nayati's band and finish this war ourselves. You can help us, or you can be counted as one of them." Samuel looked at the faces surrounding him, men he had known for years, men driven by fear and loss and rage into something dangerous and desperate. He understood their anger. He had felt it himself after Billy died, but understanding did not make their ultimatum any less terrifying. "I cannot help you," Samuel said quietly, "because I genuinely do not know where Nayati's band camps or how they operate. This is the truth." "Then you are useless to us," Morrison said, "and worse than useless, you are a liability. We should burn this place to the ground right now with you in it." "No," Bridger said sharply, "we are not murderers. But Sam, you need to understand something. This territory has no room for fence-sitters anymore. You are either with us or against us, and if you are against us, the law will deal with you soon enough. Captain Hendricks already suspects you. All we have to do is give him enough evidence and he will hang you legally." "What evidence?" Samuel demanded. "You have nothing but gossip and suspicion." "We have eyes," Bridger replied, "and we will be watching you. Every move you make, every visitor you receive. The moment we catch you with Nayati's people, we will have all the evidence we need." They rode off, leaving Samuel standing alone in the heat, his hands trembling with suppressed fear and anger. He had just been given a death sentence with a flexible execution date. From now on he would be watched constantly, his every action scrutinized for signs of collaboration. And if Nayati's people tried to contact him, for any reason, Samuel would be caught in the middle with no good options and no way out. That night, Samuel sat on his porch and stared at the stars, trying to think through his limited choices. He could abandon the ranch, flee to California or Oregon and start over. But at 52, with no money and no prospects, that seemed like slow suicide. He could go to Hendricks and offer to inform on Nayati in exchange for protection. But even considering that option made him feel sick. Nayati had saved his life. Betraying him would be dishonorable and potentially suicidal. Nayati's warriors were skilled trackers who would hunt down an informant with relentless determination. Or he could stay, keep his head down, and hope that the situation resolved itself somehow. It was not much of a plan, but it was all he had. The crisis came 2 weeks later. Samuel was working in his barn when he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. A woman crying out in pain. He grabbed his rifle and moved cautiously toward the source, which seemed to be coming from the small ravine behind his property. What he found there made his heart sink. Halona, Nayati's daughter, the one he had helped save that first winter night. She was half-conscious, bleeding from a wound in her side, her horse standing nearby with its reins tangled in brush. She must have been thrown or shot or both. Samuel looked around frantically. If anyone saw him helping her, if Bridger's men were watching right now, he was finished. But leaving her here meant she would die. There was no middle ground, no safe choice. He made his decision in seconds. He lifted Halona carefully, carried her into his barn, and laid her in a stall, hidden from casual view. The wound was serious, a bullet graze that had torn a furrow across her ribs, but not immediately fatal if treated properly. Samuel worked quickly, cleaning and bandaging the injury with practiced efficiency. Halona regained consciousness as he finished, her eyes focusing on him with difficulty. "Samuel Garrett," she whispered in heavily accented English. "You, again, save Nayati daughter." "What happened?" Samuel asked urgently. "Where are Kiona and the others?" "Cavalry. Ambush. We were scouting, looking for safe route west. They were waiting, knew we would come." Her voice was weak but steady. "Kiona escaped. I was shot. Managed to ride here before I fell." Samuel's mind raced. The cavalry had been waiting. That meant they had intelligence about Apache movements. Good intelligence. And if they were conducting ambushes in this area, they would be searching for survivors. They might come to his ranch. They might be on their way right now. "You cannot stay here," Samuel said. "It is not safe for either of us." "Cannot ride," Halona said, her face gray with pain. "Horse lame. Cannot run." Samuel looked at her injured horse and confirmed what she had said. The animal was favoring its left foreleg badly. It would not carry her more than a mile before breaking down completely, and Halona herself was in no condition for hard riding, even if the horse was sound. He was trapped. He had a wounded Apache woman hidden in his barn, hostile settlers watching his property, and the cavalry potentially on the way. Every choice led to disaster. That was when he heard the riders approaching, multiple horses moving at a steady pace. Samuel's blood turned to ice. He looked at Helona, saw the fear in her eyes mirroring his own. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Do not make a sound no matter what happens." He stepped out of the barn just as Captain Hendricks rode into his yard with 6 soldiers. The captain's face was flushed with excitement, the look of a hunter closing in on wounded prey. "Garrett!" Hendricks called out, dismounting. "We are tracking a wounded hostile, female riding an injured horse. Tracks lead right to your property. You seen anything?" Samuel felt sweat trickling down his back despite the dry heat. "No, I have been working in my vegetable garden all morning. I have not seen anyone." Hendricks studied him with the intensity of a man who had been waiting months for this exact moment. "You will not mind if we search your property then, just to be thorough?" It was not a question. Samuel nodded, knowing that refusing would be as good as a confession. "Go ahead, but there is nothing to find." The soldiers spread out, searching the house, the outbuildings, the corrals. Samuel stood motionless, barely breathing, as 2 soldiers approached the barn. He could hear them inside, moving through the stalls, checking each one. Any second now they would find Helona, and then everything would be over. But the soldiers emerged empty-handed, shaking their heads at Hendricks. "Nothing, Captain. No sign of any Apache." Hendricks's expression darkened with frustration. "Check again. Look in every corner, every shadow. She is here somewhere. The tracks do not lie." They searched again, more thoroughly. Samuel's heart hammered so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. But somehow, impossibly, they found nothing. After 20 minutes, Hendricks finally called off the search, his face twisted with barely contained rage. "I do not know how you did it, Garrett," he said, mounting his horse. "But I know she is here, or she was here, and you helped her escape. Either way, you are protecting hostiles, and that makes you a traitor." "I have done nothing," Samuel said, keeping his voice level despite the fear coursing through him. "You searched my property and found nothing. That should tell you something." "It tells me you are clever," Hendricks replied. "But not clever enough. I am posting guards around your property. If anyone comes or goes, we will know. And when we catch you, and we will catch you, you are going to hang." The cavalry rode out, but true to Hendricks's word, 2 soldiers remained behind, positioning themselves with clear views of Samuel's ranch. They were not hiding their presence. They wanted Samuel to know he was being watched, wanted him to feel the pressure of constant surveillance. Samuel waited until full darkness before returning to the barn. He found Helona exactly where he had left her, barely conscious from pain and blood loss. How the soldiers had missed her he could not understand. The stall where she lay was not particularly well hidden. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did they not see you?" Helona managed a weak smile. "Apache trick, taught since childhood. Make yourself part of the shadows. Be still, be quiet, be nothing." Soldiers see what they expect to see. They expect hiding person to move, to breathe loud, to show fear. I gave them nothing to see. It was an incredible feat of self-control, especially for a wounded woman in terrible pain. Samuel felt a surge of admiration mixed with deepening fear. "The cavalry has posted guards. They are watching the ranch. I cannot get you out without being seen." "Then I stay," Helona said simply. "When I am strong enough, I escape on foot at night." "You could die from the wound before then," Samuel pointed out. "It needs better care than I can give you here." "Then I die," Helona said with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who had lived with death as a constant companion. "Better to die free than captured. You have done what you can. I do not ask more." But Samuel could not accept that. He had not saved her life twice only to watch her die in his barn from an untreated wound. There had to be a way. The answer came to him as he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it was the only option he could see. He waited until the darkest hours before dawn, then slipped out of his house and made his way on foot to the North Ridge, where Kiona had taught him to light signal fires. The cavalry guards were watching his ranch, but they were watching for riders, for obvious movement. They were not expecting a middle-aged rancher to hike 3 miles through rough terrain in the middle of the night. Samuel moved carefully, using every scrap of cover until he reached the ridge. He built the 3 fires exactly as Kiona had shown him, using dry wood that would produce smoke visible for miles once the sun rose. Then he made the long hike back, arriving at his ranch just as the eastern sky began to lighten. The cavalry guards noticed nothing. They were watching the ranch, not the distant ridge. They had no reason to look for signal fires. Samuel had just committed treason in the most literal sense. He had called for help from the enemy, knowing that help would come with violence and blood. But he could see no other way to save Halona's life. Now all he could do was wait and hope that Nayati would understand what Samuel was asking him to do. The Apache came at dusk. They came silently, invisibly, moving through the landscape like ghosts. The cavalry guards never saw them. One moment the soldiers were alert and watching, the next they were unconscious, taken down with such speed and precision that they never had a chance to cry out or fire their weapons. Samuel heard nothing until Kiona materialized in his doorway, her face tight with worry. "Where is Halona?" "Barn, wounded but alive. The cavalry has been watching the ranch all day. I could not get her out." Kiona nodded and disappeared. Within minutes, Apache warriors had secured the perimeter, while others tended to Halona in the barn. Samuel watched from his porch as Nayati himself rode in, his face grave. "You called for help," Nayati said, dismounting. "This is dangerous, very dangerous, for you, for us." "I know," Samuel said, "but your daughter would have died otherwise. I had no choice." Nayati studied him for a long moment. "You had choice. You could have left her to die. You could have turned her over to cavalry. Instead, you risk everything again." He shook his head, something like wonder in his expression. "You are either bravest man I know, or biggest fool." "Probably both," Samuel admitted. "What happens now?" "Now we take Halona home," Nayati said. "And we take you with us." Samuel's heart sank. "What?" "Cavalry knows you helped us. They will come back with more soldiers, maybe whole company. They will arrest you, maybe hang you on the spot. You are not safe here anymore." Nayati's voice was firm, allowing no argument. "You come with us. We protect you." "I cannot," Samuel protested. "This is my home, my land. Everything I have is here." "Everything you have is death if you stay," Nayati said bluntly. "You have two choices. Come with us and live, or stay here and die. Choose now." Samuel looked at his ranch, the house he had built with Martha, the land where Billy had learned to ride, the corrals where Duchess and the other horses waited. This was his life, his history, everything he was. Walking away from it felt like dying, but staying meant certain death. Hendricks would come back, and this time there would be no searching, no questions, just a rope and a tree. "How long?" Samuel asked quietly. "How long would I have to stay with your band?" "Until it is safe," Nayati said. "Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe never. I do not know, but alive in hiding is better than dead in the open." Samuel thought of Martha, of Billy, of all the choices that had led him to this impossible moment. He thought about honor and survival, about mercy and consequences. Finally, he nodded. "I will come, but I need to bring some things. And I need to do something about the cavalry guards." "Guards are alive," Nayati assured him. "Tied up, hidden. They will be found in morning. By then we will be far away. Then give me 10 minutes to gather what I need." Samuel moved through his house one last time, selecting only what he could carry. A few clothes, his wife's wedding ring, Billy's letters, the turquoise stone Nayati had given him. He took his rifle and his pistol, ammunition, and a small amount of money he had hidden. Everything else, the furniture, the supplies, the horses, except for Duchess, he left behind. It felt like watching his own funeral. When he emerged, Kiona had Duchess saddled and ready. "Your horse," she said simply. "She goes where you go." Samuel mounted up, taking one last look at the ranch that had been his entire world. In the gathering darkness, it looked peaceful and solid, a testament to years of hard work and harder choices. It seemed impossible that he was leaving it, possibly forever. "Ready?" Nayati asked. Samuel thought about lying, about saying he was not ready, and never would be, but in the end, he simply nodded. "Ready." They rode north into the darkness, 20 Apache warriors and one white rancher fleeing toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Samuel's ranch stood empty and quiet, waiting for the cavalry to arrive and discover that their suspect had vanished into the night. Captain Hendricks, Samuel knew, would not forgive this. He would see it as confirmation of everything he had suspected. He would hunt Samuel Garrett to the ends of the territory and beyond, driven by the righteous fury of a man who had been proven right. But as Samuel rode through the cool night air, surrounded by warriors who had once been his mortal enemies and were now his only hope for survival, he found he did not regret his choices. He had saved lives when he could have taken them. He had shown mercy when cruelty would have been easier. And if that made him a traitor in the eyes of his own people, then perhaps his people were wrong. Beside him, Kiona rode in silence, occasionally glancing over to make sure he was keeping up. Ahead, Nayati led with the confidence of a man who had survived impossible odds for decades. And somewhere behind them, in a hidden place Samuel could not see, Halona was being carried to safety. Samuel Garrett had lost everything to save people who owed him nothing and whom he owed even less. By any measure, it was the worst trade he had ever made. But as the stars wheeled overhead and the land opened up before them, Samuel found himself thinking that Martha would have been proud, and Billy too. That, in the end, was worth more than all the ranches in the territory. The Apache camp was hidden in a canyon so remote and well concealed that Samuel understood immediately how Nayati's band had evaded capture for so long. High walls of red stone surrounded a natural basin, with a spring-fed stream running through it, providing water even in the driest seasons. The entrance was a narrow defile that could be defended by a handful of warriors against an entire company of cavalry. Samuel's arrival caused a stir. Warriors stared at him with open suspicion, women gathered their children closer, and elders watched with unreadable expressions as Nayati led this white stranger into their most sacred sanctuary. Samuel felt the weight of their distrust like a physical thing, pressing down on him from all sides. Nayati addressed the band in Apache, his voice carrying authority and conviction. Samuel understood only fragments, but the meaning was clear from context. Nayati was explaining who Samuel was and why he deserved their protection. The speech seemed to go on forever, punctuated by murmurs and occasional challenges from warriors who clearly disagreed with bringing an outsider into their camp. Finally, Kiona translated for Samuel's benefit. "Father has declared you are under his personal protection. He has told them how you saved us, how you risked everything multiple times for our people. He says any who harm you will answer to him directly." But she paused, choosing her words carefully. "You must understand, many here have lost family to white men, sons, daughters, husbands, wives. They see your face and remember those who murdered their loved ones. You will not be welcomed by everyone." "I understand," Samuel said quietly. "I do not expect welcome, only survival." Over the following days, Samuel learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of the Apache camp. Some people treated him with cautious respect, acknowledging the debt Nayati's family owed him. Others ignored him completely, pretending he did not exist. And a few, particularly younger warriors who had lost family to cavalry raids, made their hostility clear through glares and muttered comments Samuel did not need to understand to interpret. He made himself useful where he could, helping with heavy work, tending horses, assisting with camp chores. He learned Apache words and phrases, building a basic vocabulary through patient instruction from Kiona and Ayasha. Halona recovered slowly in the care of the medicine woman, and each time Samuel saw her improving, he felt the validation of his choices. But as weeks turned into a month, then 2 months, Samuel began to understand the precariousness of his situation. He was a guest who could never truly belong, a white man in an Apache world, forever marked as an outsider, no matter how much good he had done. It was Nita, the youngest of Nayati's daughters, who helped bridge some of that distance. She was 23, the most fluent in English of all the sisters, and possessed a curiosity about the white world that her siblings had hardened themselves against. "Tell me about your wife," she asked one evening as Samuel sat by a fire, carving a piece of wood into the shape of a horse, a habit from his ranching days that his hands remembered even when his mind wanted to forget. Samuel hesitated, then found himself talking about Martha, how they had met in St. Louis, how she had agreed to come west with him despite her family's protests, how she had made their rough ranch house into a home through sheer determination and love. He spoke of her illness, her long decline, the way she had faced death with grace and courage. "She sounds like a Apache woman," Nita said thoughtfully. "Strong, brave, not afraid of hard life or hard death." "She was all of those things," Samuel agreed. "The strongest person I ever knew. You loved her very much." "I still do. Death does not end love, it just changes its shape." Nita nodded, understanding in her dark eyes. "My mother died when I was 16. Cavalry killed her during raid on our camp. She was getting water from stream, like Halona told you. They shot her because she ran, because she was afraid. Father says if she had stood still, maybe they would have let her live. But we will never know." Samuel felt the familiar ache of shared grief. "I am sorry. No one should die like that." "Many people die like that now," Nita said. Apache, white settlers, soldiers, everyone killing everyone else, and for what? For land that belongs to no one and everyone, for revenge that never satisfies, for pride that costs more than it is worth. She looked at him directly. You are different, Samuel Garrett. You see beyond the killing. I think this is why Father trusts you. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the camp entrance. Warriors grabbed weapons and took defensive positions with the smooth efficiency of long practice. Samuel's heart raced, fearing cavalry attack, but instead he saw a lone Apache rider entering the camp, a scout, moving with urgent purpose. The scout spoke rapidly to Nayati, gesturing toward the south. Whatever the news, it was serious. Warriors gathered around their chief, listening intently as he issued orders. The camp transformed into controlled chaos, people packing supplies and preparing to move. Kiona found Samuel and pulled him aside. We must leave. Scout reports large cavalry force moving north, more than 100 soldiers with Comanche scouts. They are sweeping the territory, destroying every Apache camp they find. We must go now. Where? Samuel asked. Farther north, into mountains where cavalry cannot follow easily. It will be a hard journey, dangerous. But staying here means death for all of us. Within hours the camp was abandoned. Warriors destroyed what could not be carried, erasing evidence of their presence. The band moved out in organized groups. Warriors as guards, women and children in the protected center, extra horses for speed and flexibility. Samuel rode with Nayati's family, Duchess carrying him with the same steadiness she had shown through all their years together. The journey was brutal. They traveled mostly at night, hiding during the day in caves and canyons. Food ran short and children cried from hunger before falling into exhausted silence. Elderly members of the band struggled with the pace, but no one was left behind. The Apache took care of their own, even when it meant greater risk for everyone. On the fifth night, Comanche scouts found them. The attack came at dawn, a dozen Comanche warriors hired by the cavalry to track and harass Apache bands. They struck the rear guard with terrifying speed, killing 2 warriors before Nayati's men could mount an effective defense. Samuel found himself in the middle of a firefight, bullets whipping past his head as he tried to control Duchess and find cover. He saw a Comanche warrior bearing down on Ayasha, who had become separated from the main group. Without thinking, Samuel raised his rifle and fired. The Comanche fell from his horse, and Samuel felt sick as he realized he had just killed a man. The first time in his life he had taken a life directly. The battle was brief, but savage. When it ended, 3 Apache warriors were dead, along with 5 of the Comanche scouts. The rest fled south, doubtless to report the band's location to the cavalry. Nayati knew they now had hours, not days, before soldiers arrived in force. We cannot outrun them anymore, Nayati said that night, his face haggard with exhaustion and grief. They have too many scouts, too many soldiers. They will chase us until we are all dead or captured. Then what do we do? Kiona asked. Nayati looked at Samuel for a long moment, then said something that shocked everyone present. We try something new, something never tried before. That night, by firelight, Nayati explained his idea. It was audacious, possibly suicidal, but the more Samuel heard, the more he thought it might actually work. We make peace, Nayati said. Not surrender. Peace. We negotiate terms that let my people survive with dignity. But to do this, we need someone cavalry will listen to. Someone who can speak for us but is not seen as enemy. His eyes fixed on Samuel. We need you. Samuel felt his stomach drop. They think I am a traitor. Hendricks wants to hang me. Hendricks wants to hang everyone, Nayati replied. But there are other officers, other authorities. Men who might listen to reason if right words are said by right person. You are white man. You speak their language. You know their ways. And you have lived with us, seen that we are not monsters. You can tell them truth in ways they might hear. You want me to negotiate on behalf of the Apache, Samuel said slowly, understanding the full weight of what was being asked. To stand between 2 armies and try to convince them both that peace is possible. Yes, Nayati said simply. I know it is much to ask, maybe too much, but I see no other way. My people are dying. Your people are dying. This cannot continue. Someone must try to stop it. Samuel thought about all the reasons to refuse. He was no diplomat, no trained negotiator. He had no authority, no official standing. The cavalry considered him a criminal, and many in Nayati's own band still viewed him with suspicion. He would be trusted by neither side, respected by no one. But as he looked around the fire at the faces of Nayati's daughters, Kiona, Helona, Ayasha and Nita, he saw hope flickering in their eyes. Hope that someone might finally find a way to end the endless cycle of violence that had consumed their lives. "I will try," Samuel said. "I do not know if I can succeed, but I will try." The plan took shape over several days of intense discussion. Samuel would ride south under a white flag, seeking to contact cavalry officers other than Hendricks, men who might be more pragmatic, more willing to consider alternatives to total war. He would carry a message from Nayati. The Apache were willing to negotiate but not to unconditionally surrender. They wanted territory where they could live according to their ways, protection from corrupt reservation agents, and guarantees of safety for their families. In exchange, they would agree to stop raiding, to live peacefully, and to help the army track down other hostile bands still conducting warfare. It was not perfect, and it would not satisfy the hardliners on either side, but it might save lives. Samuel rode out on a clear morning in late October, Duchess carrying him south toward an uncertain fate. Behind him, Nayati's band moved to a hidden canyon to wait, their survival depending on whether Samuel could convince men who hated him to listen to reason. He found the cavalry 3 days later, not Hendricks's unit, but a larger force under the command of Colonel Marcus Thompson, a career officer known for pragmatism rather than ideology. Samuel approached with his white flag raised high, expecting to be shot at any moment. Instead, he was surrounded, disarmed, and brought before Thompson, a gray-haired man with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much death and was weary of it. "You are Samuel Garrett," Thompson said. It was not a question. "I am, sir. Captain Hendricks has been looking for you. He wants to hang you for treason." "I know, sir. But before you turn me over to him, I ask that you hear what I have to say. It is important." Thompson studied him for a long moment, then gestured to a camp stool. "Sit. Talk. I will decide what to do with you after I hear your story." Samuel talked for 2 hours, explaining everything. How he had helped Nayati's daughters, how that had led to an unlikely alliance, how he had come to understand the Apache not as savages, but as desperate people fighting for survival. He spoke of the atrocities committed by both sides, the cycle of revenge that benefited no one, and the possibility that peace might still be achievable if both sides could look beyond their hatred. Thompson listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Samuel finished, the colonel sat in silence for several minutes, apparently considering what he had heard. "You are asking me to negotiate with hostiles," Thompson finally said, "to treat them as legitimate adversaries, rather than criminals to be eliminated. Do you understand how unpopular that would be? How many people would see it as weakness?" "I understand, sir. But I also understand that the current strategy is not working. Nayati's band has evaded capture for years. They know this territory better than any cavalry unit. You can chase them forever, losing soldiers in ambushes and raids, or you can try something different. Something that might actually end the bloodshed." "What makes you think Nayati will keep his word?" Thompson asked. "What guarantee do I have that this is not a trap?" "I will be that guarantee," Samuel said. "If Nayati breaks the peace, you can hold me responsible. Hang me if you like. But I believe he is sincere. He is tired of watching his people die. He wants a way out that does not end with his children on a reservation, starving and forgotten." Thompson studied Samuel with renewed interest. "You would stake your life on his honor?" "I already have, sir, multiple times, and he has never betrayed me." What followed were weeks of careful, tense negotiations. Thompson proved willing to at least explore the possibility of peace, though he made clear he could not promise anything without approval from higher authorities. Messages were sent to territorial governors and military commanders. Samuel rode back and forth between the cavalry and Nayati's camp, carrying proposals and counter-proposals, trying to find common ground between two sides who had spent years trying to kill each other. Captain Hendricks appeared during the 3rd week, furious at being excluded from the negotiations. He confronted Thompson in front of Samuel, demanding that the traitor be arrested immediately. "Samuel Garrett has been working under my authority," Thompson said coldly. "If you have a problem with that, take it up with the Territorial Command. Until then, you will not interfere with these negotiations." Hendricks turned his fury on Samuel. "You think you are clever, hiding behind the Colonel's protection, but this will fail. Nayati will betray you, and when he does, I will personally put the noose around your neck." "If that happens, Captain, you will not need to," Samuel replied quietly. "I will put it there myself." The breakthrough came in mid-November. The territorial governor, desperate to show progress on the Indian problem before winter elections, agreed to designate a tract of land in the northern mountains as Apache territory. It was not prime land, too rocky and remote for most settlers to want, but it had water, game, and enough resources for a determined people to survive. Nayati's band would be allowed to live there under their own governance, with minimal military oversight, in exchange for ending all raids and helping track down other hostile bands. It was not everything Nayati had hoped for, but it was more than he had dared expect. When Samuel brought the final terms to him, the Apache chief sat in silence for a long time, weighing the offer against the alternatives. "This land they offer," Nayati finally said. "It is far from our traditional territories, far from the places where my ancestors are buried, but—" He paused, looking at his daughters, at the children playing nearby, at the warriors who had followed him for so many years. "It is a place where my people can live, where my grandchildren might grow up without running from soldiers. This is worth more than the honor of dying in the old places." "So you agree?" Samuel asked. "I agree. We will try this peace. We will make it work if we can. And if it fails—" Nayati's expression hardened. "At least we will have tried something other than endless war." The formal peace ceremony took place in early December, witnessed by Colonel Thompson, territorial representatives, and a carefully selected group of Apache warriors and elders. Samuel stood beside Nayati as the agreement was signed, feeling the weight of history pressing down on them both. This was not a perfect peace, not a solution to centuries of conflict, but it was something. It was a chance. Captain Hendricks refused to attend, making his contempt for the proceedings clear to anyone who would listen, but even he could not override the territorial governor's decision, much as he wanted to. As part of the agreement, all charges against Samuel Garrett were dropped. Officially, he had been working as an unofficial intermediary under military authorization. His property, which had been seized by the territorial government, would be returned to him. He was free to go back to his ranch and resume his life. But as Samuel watched Nayati's band prepare to move to their new territory, he found himself reluctant to leave. He had spent months living with these people, learning their ways, becoming part of their story. Returning to his empty ranch seemed like stepping backward into a life that no longer fit. It was Kiona who confronted him about it. "You are not going back, are you?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "I do not know. Everything I owned is there, but everyone I cared about is dead. What am I going back to? Memories and ghosts." "You are welcome to come with us," Kiona said, "to our new territory. Father has said so. You could build a new ranch there, help us bridge the gap between Apache and white worlds. We will need someone who understands both peoples, who can help us navigate the peace." It was tempting, more tempting than Samuel wanted to admit, but something held him back. "I do not belong in your world, Kiona. Not really. I am white. I was raised with different values and different ways. I can visit, I can help when needed, but living among you permanently, it would not work, for you or for me." Kiona nodded, understanding. "Then what will you do?" Samuel thought about it for a long time before answering. "I will go back to my ranch. I will rebuild what was lost. But I will stay connected to your people. I will help enforce the peace from my side, make sure settlers and soldiers understand that you are to be left alone, and if you need me, you know where to find me." "And if the peace fails?" Kiona asked quietly. "If soldiers come again, if fighting starts, where will you stand then?" It was the question Samuel had been avoiding, the one he knew had no good answer. "I will stand where I have always stood. Between the violence and the victims trying to stop what I can. It might get me killed, it probably will eventually, but I cannot do anything else. It is who I am." Kiona smiled sadly. "You are strange man, Samuel Garrett. Too stubborn to die, too foolish to run away, too good to become bad even when the world gives you every reason to. My sisters and I are grateful to have known you. Our children will hear stories about the white rancher who saved Nayati's daughters and helped bring peace. You will be remembered." "I do not need to be remembered," Samuel said. "I just need to know that something I did mattered, that all the losses meant something in the end." They said their goodbyes over the next few days. Halona, fully recovered from her wounds, gave him a beautiful woven blanket made by her own hands. Ayasha and Nita presented him with an Apache saddle, far superior to his worn cavalry model, and Nayati himself gave Samuel something precious, a ceremonial knife that had belonged to his father, a symbol of trust and friendship that went beyond words. "You are my brother now," Nayati said, gripping Samuel's arm, "not by blood but by choice. This is stronger. If you need help, I will come. If I need help, you will come." This is our bond. Until death. Until death, Samuel agreed, feeling the weight of the oath settle onto his shoulders like a mantle. He rode south toward his ranch on a cold December morning, leaving Nayati's band to their new beginning. The journey took 3 days, and with each mile, Samuel felt himself transitioning between worlds, from the Apache way of life back to the white world of ranches and towns and laws that did not always make sense. His property looked different than he remembered. The territorial government had kept it maintained during his absence, probably hoping to sell it if Samuel never returned. The buildings were intact, the corrals repaired, even some of the fencing had been replaced. It was his ranch, but also somehow not his ranch. It felt like returning to a place that belonged to someone else. Samuel spent his first night back sitting on the porch where he had watched 4 desperate Apache women emerge from the darkness a year ago. It seemed impossible that so much could have changed in such a short time. He had gone from a rancher dying alone to a man caught between 2 worlds, trusted by neither yet vital to both. Duchess nickered softly from the corral, reminding him that some things remained constant. The land was still here. The work still needed doing. The sunrise would still come regardless of human struggles and conflicts. Over the following months, Samuel rebuilt his life slowly and carefully. He acquired new cattle, planted crops, and established himself again as a working rancher. But he also became something else, an unofficial mediator between the Apache territory and the surrounding settlements. When disputes arose about boundaries or resources, both sides came to Samuel to arbitrate. When young Apache needed supplies from town or settlers needed to traverse Apache land, Samuel facilitated the exchanges. It was not easy work. Hendricks, promoted to major despite his opposition to the peace, made his continuing hostility clear at every opportunity. Some settlers refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Apache territory and pushed for renewed military action. And within the Apache community, there were those who saw the peace as betrayal, who wanted to return to the old ways of raid and resistance. But slowly, painstakingly, the peace held. Seasons passed. Children were born. The wounds of war began just barely to heal. 2 years after the peace treaty was signed, Samuel received a visitor. Nita, riding alone, arrived at his ranch with news that her father wanted to see him. She had changed since Samuel last saw her, more confident, more assured in her bearing. She wore both traditional Apache clothing and some adapted white fashion, embodying the bridge between cultures that the peace had created. "Father is dying," she said without preamble. "The medicine woman says he has perhaps weeks, maybe days. He asks for you." Samuel rode north that same day. He found Nayati in a lodge overlooking the valley where his people had built their new community. The Apache chief had aged dramatically, his body withered by the illness eating him from within, but his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent. "Brother," Nayati greeted him in English, his voice weak but steady. "You came." "Of course I came," Samuel said, sitting beside his friend's bed. "You called." They talked through the afternoon and into the evening. Nayati spoke of his satisfaction with what they had built, his pride in seeing his grandchildren growing up without fear of cavalry raids. He spoke of his regrets, the people he had not been able to save, the traditions that would be lost or changed in this new world. And he spoke of his hopes for the future, for a time when Apache and white could truly live as neighbors, rather than enemies. "You made this possible," Nayati said. "Not just the peace, but the belief that peace could exist. When you gave your last horse to my daughters, you gave us something more valuable than your life. You gave us hope. Hope that not all white men are enemies. Hope that mercy can exist even in brutal world." "You gave me hope too," Samuel replied. "When you came to save me that first winter, you showed me that honor transcends race and culture, that the things we share as humans are stronger than the things that divide us." Nayati smiled faintly. "We are both stubborn old men who refused to accept that war was only answer. This is why we survived when wiser men died." "Not wise," Samuel corrected, "just too stubborn to quit." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, 2 men who had started as enemies and become brothers, watching the darkness settle over a land that had finally, tentatively, found a measure of peace. Nayati died 3 days later, surrounded by his family and honored by his people. Samuel stood with Kiona, Halona, Ayasha, and Nita as the Apache chief was laid to rest according to his people's customs. There was grief, certainly, but also a sense of completion. Nayati had lived long enough to see his people safe, his daughters happy, and his grandchildren free. For a warrior who had spent most of his life running from death, it was an ending to be grateful for. After the funeral, Kiona approached Samuel. "Father asked me to give you this." She handed him the turquoise stone Captain Hendricks had confiscated years ago. He traded for it, got it back from a soldier who bought it from Hendricks. He wanted you to have it. Proof that the debt was paid and more than paid. Samuel closed his hand around the stone, feeling its familiar weight. The debt was paid long ago. Everything after that was friendship. "Yes," Kiona agreed, "and friendship continues, even after death. You are still family to us, Samuel Garrett. You always will be." Samuel rode home through familiar territory, past landmarks that had witnessed so much violence and were now peaceful. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from desperate rancher facing death to unlikely peacemaker, from isolated settler to bridge between worlds. It had cost him almost everything: his comfortable isolation, his simple life, his certainty about who his enemies were and who his friends could be. But he had gained something more valuable. He had gained purpose, connection, and the knowledge that one person acting with mercy and courage could change the trajectory of history. The peace was fragile and would require constant nurturing. There would be setbacks and challenges, but it existed. Against all odds, impossibly, it existed. Samuel Garrett, now 55 years old, weathered by sun and hardship but still standing, arrived at his ranch as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Duchess whinnied a greeting from the corral. Smoke rose from his chimney where a fire waited, and on the northern horizon, barely visible in the fading light, he could see the mountains where Nayati's people built their new lives. He had given his last horse to 4 Apache sisters on a desperate winter night, and at dawn their father had brought an army. But that army had not come for war. It had come with gratitude, with honor, and with the possibility of peace. Samuel had survived by choosing mercy over safety, connection over isolation, and hope over cynicism. The territory would remember him not as a hero or a traitor, but as something more complex and more human, a man who refused to accept that hatred was the only option, who insisted that even enemies could become friends if given the chance. As he unsaddled Duchess and prepared for the evening, Samuel found himself thinking about what Nayati had said, that giving away his horse had given the Apache hope. But Nayati had given Samuel something equally valuable, proof that honor and humanity could survive even in the harshest circumstances, that the bonds we forge in adversity are stronger than the divisions we inherit from history. The story was not over. Peace would require endless work, constant vigilance, and continued courage from people on both sides, willing to bridge the divide. But the foundation had been laid, built on a simple act of mercy between enemies who chose to become something better. Samuel Garrett went inside his warm house, hung his hat on the peg Martha had made, and sat down in the rocking chair where she had spent her final months. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed countless tragedies and occasional triumphs across this unforgiving land. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But tonight, Samuel allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in years: satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was the hard thing, especially when it was the hard thing. He closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him, content in the knowledge that his last horse had bought more than survival. It had bought the chance for something better, and in the end, that made every sacrifice worth the price. The desert wind blew softly across the territory, carrying with it the promise of another sunrise, another day, another opportunity to choose mercy over vengeance, connection over isolation, hope over despair. And somewhere in the mountains to the north, 4 Apache sisters told their children the story of the white rancher who had saved their lives and changed their father's heart, ensuring that Samuel Garrett's legacy would live on long after he was gone, not as a conqueror or a saint, but as a man who had simply tried to be decent in a world that made decency dangerous. That, in the end, was enough.